here's, I guess, two questions. Why is it the resurrection that makes us want to connect? And why isn't that just a human thing? Somebody who believes that um, life is beautiful and it's rich and vast and diverse and a lot of the things that the Christian narrative puts forth. You know,
Right.
one thing that you always said that I like is life is messy and it's
Yeah.
beautiful. And you know, so um, those are things that I've heard a lot from the Christian narrative. Why are those specific to that? And does the resurrection have anything to do with that? And why wouldn't that just be just people? Why couldn't we do that outside of the resurrection? I guess is one question.
Well, we could, but it's that kind of it's that belief that there is, Tolkien was big on this, C.S. Lewis was big on this. A lot of people write about it that there is this sense in all of us that there's this grand narrative of a beautiful world, that something happened and some kind of inciting incident that it all went off the rails, and we're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to fight for justice and love and reunion, and we love this picture of redemption and things coming back together and people coming back together and life coming back together and love defeating hate and life overcoming death. And so, as I think it was Tolkien that says, if there's not one big meta narrative where that actually is the truth, then it
Mm-hmm.
mocks all the little narratives we have in our hearts and the legends that we tell ourselves about that type of story. It makes them all a lie. But see, we don't we believe there is a huge meta narrative that is historical. It's true. It's happened in this world. We're in a chapter of that story, that unfolding drama right now. And
Mm-hmm.
so um and it's important to believe in this Christ and follow this Christ, and for humanity to stop trying to save ourselves and fix ourselves and deliver ourselves, and to start to see him as the one who really does put life back together.
Hmm. So,
And
is it kind of what you're saying that the difference is, um, I guess, from coming from maybe like a story where there is no meta narrative, and I just want to connect with people because I observe, and I think most people would, that in our core we have this need to connect with other people in a deep, meaningful way. Um,
mhm,
and if that's my story, there's no end, there's no beginning to it other than electrons and molecules
yeah,
and physical stuff. Um, what is it that about you having this meta story? And maybe you said that, maybe that's what you were saying with the Tolkien quote. What is it that would shape your little moment of history, and then maybe Christian history differently than outside of that story? I guess, or is there anything? I don't know.
well, I mean, I think as people of the Jewish Christian faith, we should celebrate anybody who's. It's almost like you're kind of you're kind of living aspects of this story drama without believing it, and by faith uniting yourself to it. I still think those are beautiful expressions of the image of God in humanity. And those are, it's almost like we need to tell people, okay, what's the story that makes sense of the story you're enacting right now?
Hmm.
Why are you enacting this story? Why are you living this type of way, um,
Mm-hmm.
in the midst of this thing called life that's we're a part of, And I do think, that's why we should be the big story celebrators, storytellers, story livers. I almost believe that in modern times, the greatest defenders of the Christian faith are African Americans, because the African American narrative is so dang powerful. It's very interesting. I've heard a lot of people say this, that Western Europeans, if you do any kind of ministry in Western Europe and if you really want to draw a big crowd there, you know what you do? You invite a gospel choir an African American black gospel choir from the United States to come do a concert because nobody can deny the power of the story they inhabit, the story they're a part of, this incredible liberation, this incredible love defeating hate, life overcoming death, this renewal of the world, this healing of neighborhood. Okay, they can't deny it, and yet it is like because most of Western Europe is very secular. They want to try to find. They want to try to believe this great story somehow didn't need its like theological roots to make it happen.
Yeah.
You know, whereas the African American story is very much rooted in the great Exodus narrative. It's great. It's very much rooted in the Jesus being the greater one than Moses and dying, going into our slavery to liberate us and bring us out, and resurrection. Man, like, permit me, if you will. I don't know if you can follow my ADD train of thought, but for instance, I was thinking about this Dylan Roof. Okay, how in the world this guy who went into an AME church in Charleston, South Carolina, and massacred 9 African Americans, killed their senior pastor, and the next day, then like I think it was the next day or a day after, in mass, people from that church go to his arraignment and start pronouncing love and hope over him and reunion and you can be delivered, you can be redeemed, your life is still matters, God cares about you, what you've done is terribly wrong. But but it's part of, I don't know any other way to say it, they inhabit such a narrative of liberation and new world hope and resurrection restoration. It's almost like these glorious brothers and sisters of ours take it so seriously that, as one writer says when he's talking about Negro spirituals, in the middle of the darkness, there's a shaft of light that's been driven into them. And that shaft of light is a hope that will drive them forward through any challenges. But it is because they believe this story is true. They are rooted in a glorious creation, fall, redemption, and restoration narrative. They're on a pilgrimage, they're on a journey, and we would do ourselves a great service to, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
nobody can deny the power of the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
Nobody can deny what went on in liberation in South Africa and
Yeah.
Desmond Tutu and whatnot. Well, all that's driven by this story, every bit of it.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good. So, so basically calling up an example of a group of people who have lived and acted a very specific certain way because they are living as and seeing themselves as part of this meta story
Yes,
that you're
and
talking.
what people love to do in many dear, well-meaning people. They know the fruit of this people's story is so beautiful, but because there's this aversion to its religious roots, they try to extract it somehow. Which, by the way, I think is I would encourage that. That's very insulting. I mean, it's kind of you can't separate. I mean, all the great liberation movements of the world have had religious roots. I mean, they have. You have to have that. You have to believe there is some story worth living. There's
Hmm.
some, um, yeah, there's some big movement of redemption and reunion and restoration
Okay,
that
so
that animates the whole experience.
yeah, so I really like that. So there's a putting yourself as part of a meta story,
Hmm.
um, not not a fairy tale story, but it kind of plays with the word story a little bit actually because it has a lot of connotations of a lie. You know,
Hmm. Yeah.
she's telling stories or he's telling stories or what you
Yeah,
know.
right.
Um, so um, so it makes it stretches that word a little bit, the elasticity of that word, to put yourself into a story, asterisk real story, that's bigger than yourself, and specifically this meta story um, makes you live out in different ways, and you you know bring up one recent people group, and then that it's happened all throughout different times. Um, there's and and you know a big influencer of Martin Luther King, and a story that's very different than or significantly different than the Christian meta story. Gandhi, you know, big
Hmm.
influence on Dr. Martin Luther King. A different, very different meta story
Hmm.
than the Christian one starts, and also a very beautiful and powerful movement um, in another part of the world from
Hmm.
here. So my kind of a follow up question: if we're if we established okay the meta story, then and that's really significant, and that's directly affects. I liked the image you put, like shaft of light into our being. That it directly
Hmm.
affects that core part of humans of needing to relate deeply. So to make it more specific, then, what is it about the Christian meta story that sets itself apart from, say, um, uh, other ones? I could, like, you know, we could
Yeah.
go into a lot rather than sort of like drawing each one of those out. That just sets it apart from other ones in general. And again, and what specifically about what happened on Easter and in this East and what we're talking about in this Easter season uh, comes to play on that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say all good stories are good stories. I mean, I can, I can watch any of we, my kids and I, we still go back and watch some of those Disney movies we love, and
Yeah.
um, good stories grab my heart. I mean, good stories that people tell about. I mean, I have a friend who just got out of the hospital today after fighting coronavirus. He really should have died, and I put up a video of him leaving the hospital, and people were writing, what an incredible story! What an example of hope! What a so whether it's human stories that are real life human stories, or where they are tales of some sort that just grab your heart. The Lion King. I mean, I cry at that moment. I watch that Disney movie and I cry. I love it. You know, things were so beautiful and lush and green, and life was so great, and then everything went drab with the wrong king, and the rightful king returns, and life gets put back together. So, yeah, I think that.